every time I speak to a consumer that does not like driver assistance systems, it is because they are afraid.
Right.
They are afraid to release that control, and they don't know what's going to happen. So there's two things that have to be addressed. The fear is number one, but then it's also filling in that knowledge gap to empower them to know what is going to happen, to where they feel comfortable releasing a bit of control, knowing, just like you said, Carl, this is a safety first vehicle. So at every single interaction that you will have with this vehicle, it will be safety first. So if there is phantom braking, it is because it thought the vehicle, the technology picked up something that it thought could be or end in something bad, a collision or an accident. And so it's safety first, and being able to structure that conversation at the product specialist level is so important. And I know that we're going deep with the product specialist role. And it's like, is it really that deep? Yes.
Yeah.
It is really.
Get ready for a dynamic episode of Features Talk.
Hello, LinkedIn fam. I am so excited to be back for another episode of the Features Talk Podcast, live right here on LinkedIn, where we are bringing the voices from every corner of automotive technology in the world to empower you with the knowledge that matters the most. I am so excited, and joining me as always is our automotive product specialist, Luke Versput. Welcome back, Luke.
Hello, everyone. Another day, another Features Talk, right? So today's going to be really quite fun. We've had a really steady stream of content and conversations going on, and this is just going to be another one of the great ones. Something very near and dear to me, of course, and that is that today we're really shining the spotlight on the role of the people that are connecting consumers, the normal average consumers, with their newer high-tech cars and the features that come along with them, which are, of course, the product specialists. So that's obviously, that's something that, with my involvement in Features First and elsewhere, that's something that's really, really near and dear to me. And I love exploring how that the role that plays now, how that role has evolved. And we've got some really good insight on that today, don't we?
Yes, we do, because joining us is a very special guest. We have Carl Anthony, who is the founder of AutoVision News Radio and honestly a true thought leader in automotive technology and communications. He is the creator of AutoVision News Radio and the host of AutoSens InCabin Insights. Now, these are two go-to platforms for anyone who is looking to understand where the industry is headed. He is a champion for ADAS education, a frequent moderator and contributor at major events like Reuters Automotive USA, for which I believe now he's an advisory board member, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And a proud supporter of empowering women in mobility through his work with Automotive Women's Alliance Foundation. And so from launching new vehicles to traveling the country as a product specialist, Carl has been in the trenches and on the mic, helping both consumers and engineers stay informed and inspired. So Carl, welcome to the show. We are so thrilled to have you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Luke, for that warm introduction. This is probably the time when I should say that the script is flipped. Usually I'm hosting, and I am a very, very nervous public speaker. So yes, I moderate panels. I've done that. But every time I'm on a microphone, every time there's an audience, every time I'm in a room, every time there's a camera on, I'm always very nervous, but thank you for that warm introduction. I feel much better.
Yes, yes. And you know what? I understand that. That's normal. I think that's normal for anybody. Even after you've been doing it for years, there's still these little butterflies that you get. And so that's why we like to start this every single live episode off with an icebreaker question. So that is what we're going to do. And so, Carl, you've gone from small town beginnings to moderating some of the most influential conversations in the automotive industry. What's a memory from your early days, either growing up or working in the field as a product specialist, that still fuels your passion for this work today?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think, as far as a memory from my early days, I grew up in an area in Northwest Iowa, which is really kind of an intersection between Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, and then Minneapolis. So your big cities, as they were, are Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Omaha, Nebraska, Des Moines, Iowa, and then a little farther away in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And so I grew up in an area that I grew up in a town called Lamar's, Iowa. And so the next time that you're in the grocery store and you see Wells Blue Bunny ice cream or an ice cream bar,
Oh, yeah.
just take that, flip that over. You're going to see a zip code on the back that reads 51031, 51031. That's Lamar's, Iowa. That's where I'm from. That's where I was born. The ice cream capital of the world, designated in 1994. And if you're ever in the area, visit the ice cream parlor on Central Avenue. So as kids, we grew up in the shadow of the ice cream plants. And so specifically, if you're in Lamar's, there's a couple of main streets. If you're riding your bikes on Plymouth Street downtown near where the Fairway store is at, that's a grocery store, very popular in Iowa. And if you turn and you go up 2nd Avenue, and then where 2nd Avenue intersects with 2nd Street, the North Ice Cream plant is so big that it blocks out the sun, out the sun. And so we said as kids that, we grew up in the shadow of the ice cream plants. So, fast forward to, 2003, 2004, I'm at college at Iowa Western Community College, which is in Council Bluffs, other side of the river from Omaha. I'm doing radio and television broadcasting. I graduate that program, moved to Southwest Iowa, Atlantic, Iowa, just about 8 miles off I-80 in Cass County, the county seat of Cass County. And there I'm at a station called KJN, AM 1220, and I'm covering local news, sports, a lot of local sports, high school football, high school baseball, and the floods of 2008, which were just catastrophic, the Iowa flooding of 2008. So I covered all that, and I did a lot of farm news. So what you kind of realize growing up in Iowa as an early memory is that between ice cream and farming, you have people that are working 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week if you're farming. They're going to church on Sunday. They're working to raise their kids, and they're praying to get them to college is basically it. Now I moved to Michigan, so not an early memory, but a memory that is back 2013. So what is that now? It's 12 years ago or so. So I moved to Michigan in 2013. I'm in Downriver, Michigan. So that's south of the Detroit River. If you're not familiar with Detroit, that's south of the Detroit River down I-75. And those are communities like Allen Park, Woodhaven, Trenton, and then Flat Rock. And if you're a Mustang enthusiast, you'll know that Flat Rock Assembly Plant's where they build the Mustang. It's the same thing. When I first saw it, it's a huge, sprawling manufacturing facility right there on I-75. And it felt like it blocked out the sun the very first time I saw it. So what you realize is that between auto workers and farmers and ice cream factory workers, that it's the same. Working 6-7 days a week, going to church on Sundays, raising your kids, raising your family, taking care of an elderly parent. You're praying to get your kids to college, right? So if you take my early memories growing up in the farming communities of rural Iowa and covering farm news, and then being in the shadow of the ice cream plants, as it were, and being part of town celebrations in the late 80s and the 90s around the fact that we had Wells Blue Bunny ice cream. So if you take all that and you were to replace the manufacturing plants with the ice cream plants and the automotive suppliers up here in Michigan to the north, if you took their facilities, replaced them with corn and soybean fields, the whole situation, for lack of a better word, is nearly, if not exactly the same. So they're industries that support an entire area of people that have dedicated their lives to it. So all of that, you mentioned AutoVision News Radio, my podcast, all of that is built into my podcast. That philosophy growing up in Iowa and then moving to Michigan and drawing the parallels between the two areas, that's underpinned in each episode. So yes, I have those early memories of, learning how to drive my father's 1987 Chevy Silverado on the back roads with
Nice.
305 V8. My dad's 1979 Ford Thunderbird with a 351 Cleveland, beautiful baby blue car, long hood. I have those memories, but the overarching early memory, to answer your question, is growing up in an area with people who worked very, very hard. And I latched onto that when I first moved to Detroit about 12 years ago.
Well, I tell you what, you can see that philosophy is embedded in your work.
Thank you.
From your early days of, product specialist to what you're doing now for the industry. It's pretty freaking amazing, if I can say.
Thank you.
It really is. It really is. And knowing that this is a product specialist edition, I was super excited to even know and find out more about your early career as a product specialist, because I think it's very interesting to see the evolution of this idea of a product specialist. And now this evolution of it even being separated from the sales team. So this product specialist is not part of the marketing team and not part of the sales team, but it's its own section. It's its own experience for the customer. And considering your product specialist experience to date, and being the creator of AutoVision News Radio, sitting with some of the most leading OEMs, can you speak to the shift that the industry is experiencing right now, from selling cars to now educating about technology?
Yeah. I think that it has become a necessary focal point. And one of the Genesis comes to mind. So when Hyundai was launching Genesis, and this has probably been about, 10 years ago or so, when Genesis was going to become a standalone brand. And then as, Hyundai moved through that process, you would start to see press releases in the 2017, 2018 timeframe that, Genesis was going to have retailers. They were going to have locations, but they were going to be staffed with product specialists or product concierges. And these staff members were not paid on commission. They weren't really salespeople, but they were designed to sort of walk you through the process and give you an experience as it were. So, a car like a Genesis, a higher end, a premium vehicle. So, what are the different wheel options? What are the different interior trims? That type of stuff, I think, I don't want to say it's not that it replaced the dealership model, but it became an integral part of the dealership model, where the idea was to have consumers sit down in an area that's comfortable, in an area where they could see, maybe even touch the interior materials. They could see everything. There was conversations not just limited to Genesis, but to other retailers as well, where you could have augmented reality, where, a consumer could see the interior ahead of time before they actually bought the car. And so I think there is some inspiration here from the ultra premium manufacturers. So this is things like Bentley Mulliner, Lamborghini Ad Personam, McLaren MSO, McLaren Special Operations, where the idea is that you provide this bespoke experience where everything down to your interior materials, again, to your wheels, to the calipers, it's all a very bespoke, custom tailored experience. And I think some of the premium manufacturers have gotten on board with that. And then likewise, your everyday, your volume, let's call them volume manufacturers, have done the exact same thing. So I think that there is a fundamental shift, because the hard sell, as it were, hey, Lisa, hey, Luke, what can I do to put you in this car today? Let me talk to my manager. I just don't think that really resonates with a new generation of buyer versus, hi, Lisa, hi, Luke, I see that you've written in, you're very interested in, the caramel colored interior. You're very interested in, the all-wheel drive model. Let's sit down and I can kind of take you through what that might look like, So that's where I think that shift is coming from.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And also, like when you mentioned, the difference between like the ultra high end of like McLaren MSO, Lamborghini Ad Personam, Ferrari TaylorMade,
Yeah.
and then and so on. And then like Porsche PTS, for example, especially when it comes to their paint colors. And so, and then going from that to then the volume manufacturers, where then there's like the luxury brands that kind of are in between the pure volume manufacturers, and then those, like, for example, then there's BMW individual, Mercedes-Benz manufacturer, and so on. And yeah, that's been a big shift, is having people that I've seen also is having people that are dedicated to prior to the sale, those specific options, to tailor it to them, but then also after the sale, once they've when the car's there and they're ready to go to drive away with it, having that product specialist be not someone who has to convince you to buy the car, who's not on commission. It's like they're not they don't have any kind of like ulterior motive for like trying to say what they're saying. They're just there to educate. That's actually how Lisa and I met.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Lisa was just another one of the people that I was helping out with with delivering her new Kia Optima, and then
I
snagged you. Yep. And then one, and then a couple of years of FeaturesTalk podcast later, here we are.
I love what you said, and I think it's very interesting too, because it seems like this, bespoke experience was really centered around money. It was centered around who can afford it, right? Yeah. These luxury brands, right? Yeah. And so now when we're thinking about how far we've come with technology innovation, and we mentioned this in a previous episode where we're saying, the safety of a vehicle now is tied to the technology in the vehicle. Right. So that means that now this bespoke experience is now, it has to be for everyone, because now we have these advanced technologies that need explanation, and I remember when we were talking, Carl, the first time we had a nice conversation and we were sharing different stories. You shared with me that you recently went shopping for a car, right? Yeah, and that sales rep or the product specialist, they skipped over the whole educational side of what should have been presented to you, because they found out that you were, in the industry, or that you knew of cars. And so that makes me think about just the sheer amount of data right now that customers have access to prior to going to the dealer, right?
Right.
And going to the dealer and knowing that, we have a very knowledgeable customer here, so we don't really have to go too deep into this information. But then there's also the knowing that there's so much technology that the average driver, especially driver assistance systems, that they either have not experienced or they don't even know exist. And so my question to you is, in the age where customers often come in more informed now, what industry communication barriers do you see that can contribute to the knowledge gap of driver assistance systems and connected technologies, and then even further, software-defined vehicles?
Mm-hmm. So this is a really good question. So, talking about communication barriers, I want to reference, because they'll do a better job than I can say it. So, industry communication barriers that are going to contribute to this knowledge gap of ADAS and connected technologies. For one, in the automotive industry, we love our acronyms: ADAS, SDVs, KPIs, AI, and so on and so forth. Yeah. But I think sometimes we have to, look at cars from the standpoint of somebody who's not in the industry, who's somebody who's not, they're not even car enthusiasts. They're just like, hey, I need a reliable car that gets good gas mileage to go to work and back. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the communication barriers or bottlenecks is addressed in an annual study that's done every year by AAA. They've been doing this since 2016. And what it does is it gauges opinions and sentiments of the American public on self-driving cars and ADAS. So AAA's survey this year, it was very similar to what they found in the most recent past. So they've been conducting this since 2016. In 2025, when they did the study in January, Survey participants, 61% said that they were afraid to ride in a self-driving car, and only 13% said that they would actually, trust doing it. And then another 26% were unsure about the idea. So those were the 2025 numbers. AAA's annual study, 61% said, I'm afraid. 13% said they would not trust it, and 26% were like, yeah, I'm not really sure. But those findings are in line with previous years. But what's interesting is in the 2025 survey, the findings on ADAS improvements, so automakers optimizing these ADAS systems, that has been consistent with what AAA has found in the more recent past. So 78% in the 2025 survey said that they want OEMs to prioritize safety system advancements as they develop and manufacture new models. So when you look at this AAA study, that is a stark contrast because only 24% in that study said that vehicle styling was the most important, and then only 13% said that automakers should prioritize autonomous cars. So for automakers that are, sort of reading between the lines, when you look at this, there's evidence to suggest that what consumers really want, they want improvements to existing ADAS features. The better those ADAS features perform in the real world, the higher the trust levels in those systems. But here's where the bottleneck comes in, is that if you look at these AAA studies over the last, 9 years now, overwhelmingly, Americans don't really trust autonomous cars, but they're warming up to the idea of ADAS, and they really want ADAS functions to be next generation ADAS functions to be better, to be more optimized, right? But the bottleneck comes in is that the names are confusing.
Yep.
So how do you know what these things do? Advanced adaptive cruise control with lane assist, with stop and go, with radar dynamic. So again, even for us in the industry, that might be confusing to follow. So to that end, AAA is one of 6 organizations that advocate for a universal naming structure or a universal naming nomenclature for ADAS features. So AAA joins Consumer Reports, JD Power, the National Safety Council, PAVE, or Partners for Automated Vehicle Education, and then the SAE. They all have this joint mission called Clearing the Confusion. And so basically what they say is, let's, take the acronyms and let's define what they are, and let's not do proprietary names. So each feature on this list that these 6 organizations have, they're given a straightforward name. So if you look at the PDF document, and I'm just going to quote verbatim from it. Adaptive cruise control, very common, very ubiquitous ADAS feature. They define that as cruise control that also assists with acceleration and or braking to maintain a driver selected gap to the vehicle in front. Some systems can come to a stop and continue, and others cannot. The end.
Yeah.
And then that list is ongoing. So AAA and those other organizations, they continue to update that. So now they have newer categories like DMS features and direct and indirect driver monitoring systems, and even driver re-engagement systems. But the point is, these organizations are saying, look, this naming structure is confusing. If a consumer is shopping one make and model versus another make and model, and we know that in this body of data that AAA has done in these studies they've done, we know that consumers want higher level ADAS functionality, but when they're shopping, they may not know what these systems do, these acronyms. It's unclear as to what the system does, what it doesn't do, what's the responsibility of the driver. So ultimately, these organizations say to get rid of that bottleneck, to help reduce that communication barrier, a more universal ADAS naming structure is important. And then if you take that to the product specialist level, then as a product specialist, that's the kind of stuff you want to pay attention to in the industry. And then if you have a car, that you work for as a brand. So when I was on the auto show circuit, I was on the Stellantis, it was FCA at the time, but Stellantis. So I was on the national auto show circuit for FCA, for Chevy's national truck team. What I would do is when AAA started doing this standard nomenclature, if a consumer had questions, I would just say, yes, this is the proprietary technology. And then here are these neutral organizations that have this standardized nomenclature. This is what that is. So this is a longer name, or this is a proprietary name, or more of a marketing name. Here's the actual definition by these other neutral third body organizations.
Yeah. That, I mean, the naming contributes to so much confusion when it comes to driver assistance systems. And I'm going to go even a layer deeper than that, because, our company, we develop training, to kind of just bring this down to a 5th grade level. And we need to go a little bit deeper in understanding that some of these systems are active and some of them are passive.
Right.
So it's even getting into the experience that you are actually going to experience in the car with a active versus a passive system. And that is a very important conversation, because when consumers, I mean, just myself, when I'm thinking about driver assistance systems, are we talking about something that's taking over the wheel completely? Are we talking about something that's just warning me? Because I'm very familiar with the Clearing the Confusion document, and they break those systems up from warnings, right? So there's systems that just warn you, so there's no intervention. And then there are systems where there is intervention, where they intervene and you will feel a response in your wheel. Or one of the recent ones that Luke talked about was GM's vibrating seats when you're changing lanes. And so it's at the product specialist level, when we talk about this idea of, tech first, when you're shopping for a vehicle, it's really understanding, yes, let's clear, the confusion of the naming of what kind of technology you have in your car, but let's also give them this knowledge that they need to know of what they will experience. So some of these systems, like automatic emergency braking, you won't feel unless you are in, or you won't experience unless you are in a collision. And we hope that that is not happening, or it does happen, or it does not happen. But in the event that it does happen, that system will then engage. But then there are other systems that are working every single time you get in the car, like lane keep assist, that is working with you, and it will intervene with your wheel to try to straighten you in between the lanes. So I even think it's even, the nomenclature, that's a great start, because it is very confusing, but it's also painting the picture of what that driver is going to experience with these technologies. That type of information is so crucial at the dealer phase, at the point of sale. And Luke, I know you can speak to that with this, tech first. And tech first doesn't mean customer last, because sometimes it can be, interpreted that, if we're talking about technology, well, then I guess we're just building for technology. We're not building for drivers. No, we're putting you first by making tech first, right? And so, Luke, how do you think the tech consumer education should be prioritized at the point of sale? And how important is the product specialist at that moment?
Yeah, so from what I've seen working with just so many different kinds of people with also coming in with different priorities, right? Different consumers prioritize different features differently. Some come in wanting to know about all the safety features, and like they won't touch a car if it doesn't have if it doesn't have adaptive cruise, or they won't touch a car if it doesn't have blind spot monitoring. But then others will if they find out it does have that, they'll be like, oh, how do I turn off that? How do I turn that beeping off? Or something like that. And so there's a pretty wide gamut of priorities when it comes to different people. And I think a large part of a large contributor to some people not really feeling comfortable with, especially those more active systems that we talk about, is exactly what Carl mentioned, where there's just it can be easy if these people have done or attempted to do research on their own on these features going in. They may have just become inundated with so many of those acronyms and so many different explanations that they're just like, what? How do I turn it off? But then ultimately that will result in it being less safe. And so I think the importance of the product specialist then is to, right at that moment, not translate necessarily, but well, I guess translate the acronyms, but also just explain in very basic and practical terms. Here's what the feature does. Here's how it will help you, and in the event it does help you, here's what that experience will be like. Here's what it will feel like. And so, I think there's an enormous importance to that, and that's not even getting into then just the more like, infotainment side of things, phone connectivity. That's its whole nother rabbit hole of features. But safety wise, I think it's very important to have those, to have what that experience with those features will be like laid out in very simple terms, which was like a big talking point of ours when you first got that Optima.
Yep.
And then
I love what you said though, Luke, with the safety aspect. That is so important because when you think about a product specialist, right, the product specialist works for the dealer. Okay. So essentially the product specialist does have a job description. They do have things that they have to do. They have metrics that they need to meet, right, with the customer, making sure that they go over these things. But there's also the conversation of safety. So if you do choose to turn these systems off, here is where you are as a driver. Here is what happens if you do turn it off. And I think that conversation is even more crucial because that contributes to the trust, that contributes to the adoption, that contributes to that. And so what would you say to that, Carl, as far as, how do you think consumer education should be prioritized at the point of sale?
This is an excellent question. I like to take a historical approach to things, but I don't necessarily know that you would have to tell that to a consumer with each interaction unless they were genuinely interested in the history. But the idea of a product specialist is, and I'm not saying that this is the right way to do it. I'm just saying this is the way I did it. So when I was on Chevy's national truck team, large scale experiential marketing program that traveled the US, everywhere from state fairs to the Indy 500. And when I was on the auto show team for Stellantis, I basically said, look, I'm from Detroit. Okay, this is what I do. I do the car thing. I'm a car guy. And so I'm going to eat, sleep, and breathe and live, and represent the automotive industry and represent the hardworking men and women who design, engineer, and build these cars. And hopefully I'll have interactions with consumers that are positive and that will lead them to buy those vehicles. And then, case in point, like my example from before, the agriculture, the ice cream, right, that they will buy a vehicle that will help support the community in which I live. So, but I wouldn't always tell that to a consumer, but that was baked into my mind. That was built into every interaction. It underpinned every interaction that I had. So when I say a historical perspective, I'm going to use Volvo as an example because it's a shining example of how active and passive safety are really intertwined and how understanding both is essential in order to get this conversation right as far as communicating to the industry. So I had the opportunity 10 years ago when the XC90 was being launched for the first time or relaunched rather. I was a dealer trainer on the East Coast region for Volvo here in the United States. And at that time in the summer of 2015, so this is the 2016 XC90. So we're doing this showcase for US retailers and in our training material to dealers. In other words, we're telling the salespeople, hey, this is the stuff that, Sweden wants us to focus on. This is the stuff that is important. And this is the stuff that you want to communicate to everybody who walks through the door that's interested in this vehicle. And so one of those was, at the time, Volvo's scalable product architecture, or SPA for short. It consisted of 40% boron steel. And so in addition to the rigidity, the weight reduction, less manufacturing complexity, within SPA, built within SPA, there was this unique electrical and network infrastructure that it had. And basically this electrical architecture of SPA, it was underpinning everything in the XC90. So the connectivity, the Sensus Connect, the performance. So when you switched it into sport mode, and then of course the safety features. But that architecture for SPA was allowing the placement ahead of time for future models to have additional sensors that would support the ADAS and the automated driving function. So we were telling Volvo retailers to say, look, this is what the 2016 XC90 offers. When they trade in a couple of years, this SPA architecture that underpins this vehicle, this vehicle, this XC90 is built on, is going to support more ADAS capability. That's how it's built. It's built kind of with this forward safety in mind. So if you rewind the clock a little bit, and again, you wouldn't have to, as a product specialist, communicate this, but you're going in as a product specialist with this in mind to focus on this tech-first delivery, but still keeping the customer in mind. And then you're using the history to validate and build trust. So where you go with this is you say, if you have a technical customer, right? And sometimes Volvo customers it's that demographic. It's that demographic that is technical. So you could say, well, SPA debuted in 2013. And so there's this electrical architecture. You've got four main domain controllers: vehicle dynamics, safety, car body, infotainment. Each master can be connected to every single unit in the architecture. You could do that, right? Or you could just simply say to somebody at a base level what I said before. We're building this vehicle to be safe today, but since Volvo customers, they have high loyalty, that when you come back, the next iteration will be more safe yet. So this is kind of how Volvo does it. They ingrain this philosophy into everything they do. So when it comes to SPA, you've got a more rigid structure. That's the passive safety, but you have this electrical architecture to support the ADAS sensors. That's the active safety. Now, if you roll the clock back further and you say, okay, where does this blending come from in Volvo, this active and this passive safety? Because we have SPA. And by the way, SPA has now led itself to another architecture that Volvo is doing for their electrified vehicles. But you roll back the clock, you say, okay, in 2002, Volvo already has rollover stability control for the XC90. So I would say, Lisa, Luke, I would say, listen, the XC90, we have a long history of doing ADAS features all the way back in 2002. Over 20 years ago, we were doing rollover stability control. We were leveraging aerospace technology, what makes planes fly, a gyroscopic sensor. So this safety, this ADAS stuff, this isn't new for us. We've been doing this for a long time. By 2004, again, 20 years later, we had a blind spot information system in Volvo. So you're building this trust with this new technology and showing that it's not really actually new. 2008, you've got low-speed automatic emergency braking for Volvo. You've got the city safety system with cyclist detection by 2013. You've got intersection automatic braking, 2014. Large animal detection in 2015, which if you live in a rural area, that's worth its weight in gold. So you're saying essentially to customers, and I'm using Volvo as an example, we have all of this history doing this. But at the time in 2015, when it was new, now we have this new vehicle in the XC90 that's the latest iteration, but we've built it to be forward thinking. And then if you really want to go all the way back, you can get into Niels Bohlin and the 3-point safety belt in 1959. And that's the ultimate passive safety device. So if you're a product specialist for Volvo, you've got a lot to pull from where you can look and you can say, as a brand, we marry the passive and the active safety and our history in order to build trust in our vehicles.
That is so good. That is so good. Luke, I'm just thinking about the episode that we were talking about with the autonomous ride sharing. And we were talking about, the trust of getting into an autonomous vehicle, right? And I know that, speaking of the history, knowing how much time has been put into the engineering of these technologies, the iterations that have happened, the research on the road that has happened, and then going back to the drawing table and making it better, that has to be part of the conversation, because it does contribute to the trust of this new technology that's really not new. I love that you said that, Carl. I love that. And that that makes me think about a question. You did a recent interview with Jeffrey Morin from OmniVision this year at AutoSens, right?
Yes,
and he mentioned their pixel technology that can help prevent phantom braking. And when you think about the consumer side of experiencing driver assistance systems, many, you can go on social media and see people talking about lane keep assist and how it is, the false alerts, the false warnings, the false detections. And many drivers are sharing their stories of what they're experiencing, not knowing that there are improvements happening to these technologies to improve their experience with it. Many drivers share their stories. And so with my thinking about features first and filling this gap of knowledge, right, with ADAS at consumers, I also believe that sharing these incremental improvements is so important. Getting this information to the masses. Yes, it's circulating in the industry amongst the OEMs who are competing against each other. But do you think that these kinds of improvements should be communicated directly to the drivers? And then how can we share these incremental updates in a way that boosts adoption and use and trust?
So that's another really, really good question. And I think that if you mentioned something like phantom braking, and OmniVision has, mentioned that interview with Jeffrey Morin from OmniVision. They have the most robust sensor portfolio for this in the entire automotive industry. And so they're a very good company to, tackle stuff like this, like LED flicker mitigation, phantom braking, some of these banner challenges for autonomous driving. And even next generation ADAS. But I think if you're a driver, and you experience something, like a phantom braking, or you experience anything out of the blue of your car, it's fear inducing because you're moving. And so it might be in some ways similar to, let's say that you eat somewhere, right? And then you get a little bout of food poisoning and you're like, wow, that was terrible. And then someone's like, well, do you want to try it again? And you're like, no, you know what I mean? It's just a fear, there's no proof that you'll get food poisoning again, but it's a fear that you have, right? Now you're moving at 50, 60, 70 miles per hour. So I think that if consumers experience that, that's very, very jarring. Because, you think, a worst case scenario, it's terrifying. It's terrifying when you're in traffic and you have to hit the brakes all of a sudden, and you are purposely hitting the brakes versus your car does it automatically. So I think the first message to get out there, as best that we can through media, through dealers, through product specialists, is that a car is a safety first device. First and foremost, that yes, and again, you can say this to consumers directly. You can say, cars in the industry, in the industry where they build and design cars, the mentality is that it's a safety first device. Or you can just, in your interactions with consumers, or your interactions with the media, or your interactions with people who come to your dealership or come to your auto show display, you can just file this away back in the mind that the car is a safety first device. Yes, vehicles can be comfort focused, performance focused, convenience focused, but they are first and foremost a safety application. And so you always have to think like this. And so that again reframes your discussions with consumers. But I think that it's really understanding the fear. One, like the AAA study is indicating that they've done for the last 9 years, the one that gauges public sentiment on autonomous driving. It's scary to think that a car would drive itself. It's scary to trust new technologies. It's even more terrifying if they do something that you can't explain and you're moving at a high rate of speed. So I think we need to really, really communicate and understand this from the consumer's perspective first and foremost, if that makes sense.
Agreed. I 100% agree. It's understanding it from the consumer's perspective helps you to frame your whole conversation you're going to have with them. And it has nothing to do with selling it and more to do with the fear. I just love that you said that, because that's exactly what it is. Every time I speak to a consumer that does not like driver assistance systems, it is because they are afraid.
Right.
They are afraid to release that control, and they don't know what's going to happen. So there's two things that have to be addressed. The fear is number one, but then it's also filling in that knowledge gap to empower them to know what is going to happen, to where they feel comfortable releasing a bit of control, knowing, just like you said, Carl, this is a safety first vehicle. So at every single interaction that you will have with this vehicle, it will be safety first. Right. So if there is phantom braking, it is because it thought the vehicle, the technology picked up something that it thought could be or end in something bad, a collision or an accident. And so it's safety first, and being able to structure that conversation at the product specialist level is so important. And I know that we're going deep with the product specialist role. And it's like, is it really that deep? Yes.
Yeah.
It's really.
It is. That's what we were talking about. It reminds me of a conversation I've actually had with customers many times in the past, where one of the things that one of the pieces of feedback I would often get was that people had not great experiences with specifically lane keep assist in previous brands, right? Other brands that they may have utilized, and this was this was probably, I think like in the last couple of years, and like when we think of like lane keep assist behaving the way it does now, versus like when that was a very niche feature on like some cars in like the mid 2010s or before, and things like that, where like that was for that kind of system, that was early days. And a lot of customers would tell me like, oh, that was the one they would want to, like they would like the emergency braking and things like that, but the lane keep assist they would want to turn off because they've had it before where like they had to get out of the way of something on the freeway, but this lane keeps assist tried to put them back in lane because they just had to emergency get the heck out of the lane. And you don't think, oh, put on your turn signal first. You think, okay, if no one's over there, if I'm not going to go into someone, I just need to turn. And this thing started to put them back, and they said they had to, like, with their entire upper body, just boom, like do that. Which, again, we talk about 60, 70 miles an hour is not that kind of maneuver. It's not something you should ever be making then.
Right.
And but what I would explain to them, with at the time, like where I was working, is that the lane keep assist system for this brand, like nowadays, and why they shouldn't worry is, we talk about how these incremental improvements have happened, is that this lane keep assist system will allow you to turn within your lane.
Mm-hmm.
It'll allow you to turn within your lane. You could actually stall within your lane. Now, obviously, that won't be a great look, and that's not a safe thing to do, but it would let you do it, right? A cop might see that as intoxicated driving, so don't do that. But you could, right? It's not going to be holding you to the exact fraction of an inch of being centered in that lane. However, if you choose to activate another layer of that called lane follow assist, then you can actually go hands off the wheel. Not that I would recommend really making a habit of that, but you could go hands off the wheel, and now the system will actually keep you centered in the lane, look at the shape of the turn ahead of you, and guide itself through that turn. And if at any point you need to just get out of the lane very quickly, I would tell them that I've experienced this myself, and I did one. I've mentioned the story on our previous episodes, but where I would tell them, like, look, I drive a car of the same brand, and I have had to emergency get out of the way of something, and I never felt it resist me. I'm sure it did resist me, but not hard enough that I couldn't just go. So
yeah,
so that for me, that's one of those little, that's one of those instances of where I think it's very important for the product specialist to indicate what improvements have happened in the features.
Yes.
Not just with someone who's on their, same car of the same brand, 6 in a row and are seeing improvements in that little microcosm, but just going from one brand to another. That kind of thing is really, really important.
There's also another layer. I'm gonna go a little deeper, and and also say that, there's the conversation that needs to be had with the customer that nothing is perfect. Nothing is perfect. This technology is not perfect, and we are not telling you that it is perfect. We are telling you what the technology has been programmed to do and what you can expect. But there's also, we talk about this so many times in our episodes, is that the expectations that people put on technology today, especially like with the whole conversation of AI and, the capabilities of AI and the perfection. And I do my quotation marks because it's not perfect, right? And so it's also helping that customers set the expectations, right, of what they expect from the technology as well. So there is a possibility that it could be a false alert. There is a possibility that there could be false detection. Weather can affect these sensors. If it's not cleaned, it can affect the sensor. So even the maintenance and the maintaining of these systems need to be discussed with the product specialist. If there's a system that needs to be calibrated, you need to bring it in. If there is a recall with driver assistance systems, this is not a recall that you can just drive on, like back in the day, people just don't bring their cars in with recalls, and they're like, oh yeah, I'll just get it fixed, and I won't bring up the worst one, that's kind of airbag recall, but millions of people died because of that airbag. So recalls with technology is that more crucial. And so even having that conversation at the product specialist, I think is very important. Now, I want to touch a little bit on software-defined vehicles. Sure. And so because we see that coming down the line, Carl, I know you've been sitting down and talking about that as well. But so with the rise of software-defined vehicles, the customer experience does not end at the sale. Right? It's literally just beginning. So Carl, how do you see the role of product specialists evolving to help customers understand and get the most out of these advanced, ever updating vehicles?
Yeah. So I think it might be important for the industry to establish what a software-defined vehicle is. We all have different interpretations of it. If you're more on the product development and engineering side, you're going to say, well, it separates hardware from software, and there's a reason for that. If you're maybe more on the marketing side, you're going to say, well, it enables more connectivity and comfort features in your vehicle. So again, it depends on the consumer that's in front of you, how deep you want to go. But as a good working definition of a software-defined vehicle, you could say that the software defines the customer experience. And keep in mind that this is not 100% true, but it just as an anecdote, if you will. We would say in the past that mechanical things defined the vehicle experience. So the engine, the transmission, dropping the top of a convertible and having the wind go through your hair. We see this with the rise of the muscle car movements and the baby boomers, where cars used to be very big, but the baby boomers wanted to have their own car that was representative of their generation and the open road. And that defined the customer experience, right? Yep. So this is saying that the software defines the customer experience. Now, for the product specialist, where this becomes important is to explain to the customer what is coming with your vehicle at the point of sale for X number of years. And what is subscription based, and what do you actually need versus, what your budget is, right? And so F&I, if you're at the dealership, F&I, finance, insurance, they can be good at this with extended warranties. If a customer is interested in an extended warranty, but they don't drive very many miles, they may not need the highest level of warranty. Same if they're driving all the time and they're putting lots of miles on their vehicle, they don't want to have just a short-term, maybe powertrain only warranty. They need a full bumper-to-bumper warranty. So you're trying to match coverage based on use, right? It could be very similar with an SDV, with a software-defined vehicle. So, if there are, I'm just going to make up a number, if there are 10 infotainment connectivity subscriptions that you can have, I would say, Lisa and Luke, here's all 10. but you might not need all 10. And by the way, these first 4, they're coming with the car for the first 3 years anyway, and then features 4 and 5 are coming with the car for 100,000 miles. So basically the life of the vehicle. So 6 through 10 is really what you would want to subscribe to, and you maybe only need 2 of them, or maybe only 2 of them are interested. So I think you go through and you say, here is what this app connectivity does, because all of these vehicles have apps, right? Some kind of service connect, some kind of safety connect or EV connect, right? So a product specialist just really needs to know, this one comes with the vehicle, and then in this thing in your app, it does this, A, B, C, X, Y, Z. And then if you want to add, it's this X number of dollars per month or per year. So product specialists really have to understand that aspect. But right now with SDVs, with software-defined vehicles, we don't know. I mentioned Reuters Automotive USA in my bio. And for the last couple of years at Reuters Automotive USA here in Detroit, downtown at the Huntington Place, there's a whole stage dedicated to software-defined vehicles over the course of 3 days of that conference, where those panel discussions are nothing but SDV focused. And there's always a panel discussion about, what do we really charge for? Yes, we have the ability to offer a lot of stuff to consumers, subscription-based. But how much will a consumer actually tolerate? If you look at any study today, the number one thing you're going to see is that the cost of new vehicles is rising. It's as high as it's ever been. And that has been something that's been going on for a while. And probably when you see the next study, it will be the highest that vehicles have ever been for cost.
It'll keep going.
Yeah, it'll keep going. So you're already asking consumers to commit to a lot just to drive the car off the lot. So we have had panel discussions at Reuters Automotive USA about, what is the tolerance? And then further to that, if you look at studies that have been done, I mentioned Volvo. Volvo actually did this study back during 2020, that consumers in 2020 who were working from home, they overwhelmingly enjoyed going out for a drive because they were able to get away from their home computers. They were able to get out on the road. They looked at their car as a sanctuary. But there are many studies in the automotive industry that have said that. There's even anecdotal evidence that people say, my car is my safe space. So at Reuters Automotive USA, the last couple of years in the panel discussions, we've said, do we really want to encroach on the safe space? Do we want to send ads to the infotainment system to subscribe to such and such service? Or is that only going to alienate the consumer? So this software-defined vehicle discussion, yes, I believe for one, if you look at the science and the engineering behind it, and when you're talking about things like the intelligent edge, where ADAS, there's no latency because the computing processing, the decisions are made at the car, not in a cloud, not in a data center. So the ADAS systems can be faster and more responsive. I totally believe that's going to be great for enabling next generation ADAS. So that about a software defined car, that's probably a guarantee or pretty solid, pretty close to a guarantee as we can get. But what we can charge for as far as enabling extra features, that discussion is still very much ongoing. But as a product specialist, again, it's knowing what is a software defined vehicle at a base level. And then even today, as cars become more connected with apps and additional services, just knowing what those services are, how much do they cost, what comes with it at the point of sale. And again, not that you're always communicating this stuff to the customer, but having that education as a product specialist. Because if you look at these press releases, the new, I want to say the RAV4 from Toyota, I believe it was the RAV4, don't quote me on that, but in their press release, they talk about an architecture that Toyota has said, this is going to enable our transition into software-defined vehicles. So there's automakers that are talking about it. They're putting it out there in their press releases, which means that the automotive media is likely going to report on that. And then people who are shopping for those vehicles are going to see that word, software-defined vehicle, or some variation of it. So as a product specialist, it's just important to be educated as to all of that, what's going on in the SDV ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of Luke, to be honest, because I mean, anytime I talk about Luke, and when I met you, Carl, I said to Sam, like, you remind me of Luke. It's like the knowledge that you both have of the industry. And it's not for a specific brand. It's for the entire ecosystem. You bring that knowledge as a product specialist. Luke does that every day when he's working with customers. And so that, to me, is the standard of what a product specialist is going to need to be if we're looking at the future of where we're going with technology and now talking about software-defined vehicles. And I want to ask this question, Carl, what is your take on the post-sale experience is the new frontier of brand loyalty?
Yeah, that's also a really good question. I would say that I'll go back. I know we're almost at time, so I'll go back and I'll tell the quick story. 2009, Sioux Falls Ford, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where I got into selling vehicles, mostly F-150 trucks, but a lot of Lincoln vehicles, a lot of Ford Escapes, a lot of Ford Fusions at the time. Yep. And built into that process, Sioux Falls Ford is a Rydell Group store, if you're familiar with that automotive group. But at Sioux Falls Ford, I was lucky because I was really taught not necessarily the sales approach. I was taught the product specialist approach from day one, very first day in the car business. So I got my master certification before I ever stepped out on the show floor. I was already master certified. But back then, the post-sale experience was important. You called, you emailed, you followed up, you interfaced with the service department that they would send a notification to your computer, to your email saying, Lisa is coming in today for an oil change at 2:30. And I would make sure that I would go out to the service drive and I would greet you. Hi, Lisa. Good to see you. How's everything with the truck? How's the podcast going? Oh, I've been watching on LinkedIn. It's amazing, right? So I think one thing to remember, if you're a product specialist or you're working in sales, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Email, text, but don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Honestly, like, don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Hey, Luke. Hey, it's Carl here at XYZ Motors. Hey, how's everything working on the new sedan? Just wanted to check in with you. Any questions you have on anything at all? That's the type of thing, that post-sale, that opportunity has existed forever. And it's even more important in a connected era where cars have more and more technology, especially the ADAS technology we've been talking about.
That's a regular daily occurrence for me. And I mean daily. I mean that's part of what my job, like in writing, entails. And especially the vehicles I work with now are really kind of at the forefront of a lot of safety, but also just interior and infotainment technology. It's very, very tech forward and very software defined, as we talked about. So yeah, I'm reaching out and checking in to see, oh, do you have any questions about this or that, or the phone connectivity thing that we had talked about when you were here a couple days ago? Were we able to get that sorted out? You were able to get your your husband's phone connected as well. And yeah, so that kind of thing, it happens a lot. And so many times where I had worked before for almost 6 years, I had my coworkers there were very sweet. They I still, to this day, actually, as recently as a week and a half ago, as recently as a week and a half ago, I have some people at my previous job saying that that they've had a couple customers, mostly jokingly, but also kind of not jokingly, talking about just shopping elsewhere because they knew I wasn't there anymore.
I believe it.
And so that
good compliment.
Right. And again, that was like, and they would bring up like, oh, this customer, and of course, the people I helped were in the thousands, over the years that I had been there. So I don't remember an exact person, but I like, remind me who was that? What car did they purchase? And then I'm like, oh, them. Wait, that was 2021.
Right.
Like we're in 2025, but again, loyalty because the experience was that, like I said, if the experience is just kind of like okay, whatever, then at best they just won't say anything. At worst, it'll be some kind of negative review. If it's really good, then they'll consider coming back and getting a car again, and maybe asking for you. And if it's really, really good, they scoop you up and make you part of their podcast.
Right.
So, it can lead to a bunch of stuff. And especially referring to that time at the dealer and how the product specialist can impact that part, that very important part of the sale. We actually had one of our listeners actually ask us about that exact thing. So on Features Talk Podcast, we have one of my favorite sections, which is we call Listener Lane. And we have a lot of community engagement with us, a lot of people, giving us feedback on what we do and asking us about some of the topics that we cover and about other topics that maybe we haven't covered. So we have a lot of community engagement, and what we like to do is dedicate a portion of each podcast, usually near the end, to actually address directly one of the questions that we get from our viewers and viewers/listeners. And so we had a really great question come in this time that I think you and I both, Carl, can really kind of hit the heart of. Okay. Which is, they ask, as vehicle technology continues to advance, what's one thing that you wish dealers took the time to explain further during the car buying experience? And then along with that, what aspects of a vehicle or that delivery are often overlooked but might matter most to drivers? Yeah,
so excellent question. One, for dealers and salespeople, slow down. Yep. Reduce your rate of speed of the delivery. Yes, understanding that you need to sell and you need to put deals on the board. But I was part of one of the most successful dealerships in the Midwest at one of the most successful dealer groups in the entire United States. And the sales process is designed to go slow. Yeah. Take your time. Use a 2-to-1 ratio, 3-to-1 ratio, which means that, you're 3 parts listening, 1 part speaking, or whatever number it is. But ultimately, as my sales trainer, Kevin Foster, used to say at Sioux Falls Ford, he's like, Carl, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. He's like, that's how you sell cars, So
it's absolutely right, though.
That is going to be more important. So as vehicle technology continues to advance, dealerships, product specialists, especially those who are on the auto show circuit or who are on the state fair circuit or anything in between like that, take time to do your vehicle walk-arounds, okay? Start at the front of the vehicle, walk around. Lisa, you mentioned the sensors. Point out the radar sensors for the park assist, for the adaptive cruise control. Mention that if they're dirty, you're going to get an alert. Do a vehicle walk-around before you go on a demo drive. Mm-hmm. In the case of a ride and drive program at an auto show, same kind of thing. Product specialists, make sure your training and your curriculum has a walk-around built into it. Don't skip it. Don't skip it. Make sure that you do that. And if you're at an auto show and it's a static vehicle, it's like literally tailor-made for you to do a walk around. And then one thing that dealers wish that, took the time to explain during the car buying process, one, the ADAS features, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And then I think that one thing that can be missing, not every dealer, but one thing that can be missing is, who do I talk to if I have questions? Putting your business card in the owner's manual is one thing. But take the time to walk me to the service drive. So if Lisa is my sales consultant and I've bought a brand new XYZ vehicle, Lisa says, hey, Carl, let me introduce you to Luke. Luke is a service advisor. He's very knowledgeable. Now, I'll always be available for questions, but for your first oil change and your tire rotation, here's Luke, okay? Here's Luke's card. You want to call him. You want to talk to him. So I think that dealers should really, really make that connection. And if you're in the automotive retail world, you know the value of fixed ops, right? You know the value of fixed operations. So if this is an automotive retail conversation, you're like, salespeople, introduce the customers to a service advisor so they come back and we can get the work in the shop. But that is one thing that dealers, I think, really need to explain during the car buying process. And when I was a dealer trainer, this is something I would coach dealers on, is that at some point during that delivery, introduce them to the next person in the dealership who they'll interact with. Now I've got Luke's contact info. So if I have a warranty question, if I need an oil change, if I need a tire rotation, if my oil change light comes on, I'm like, oh, hey, Lisa gave me Luke's contact. I know to get in touch with him. Dealers need to be better about telling customers where to go next. And so our sales process at Sioux Falls Ford, tell them what to do next. Okay, Lisa, so we've taken the test drive. Here's what's next. We're going to get some information on your trade. We're going to take it and evaluate it. I'm going to introduce you to Joe. Okay, he's my manager who's going to evaluate the vehicle. While he's doing that, I'm going to put together some basic numbers for you. No pressure. If those numbers look good, we'll proceed. But for right now, we're just going to kind of work on your trade-in. That way, there's no surprises. Sometimes dealers aren't really good about telling customers what comes next in the process. So eliminating that fear, eliminating that anxiety. And then I think, having somebody present at the dealership, right when you walk in the door, you think about it. You mentioned fear, right? Consumers are scared, right? Well, some of these dealerships, when you look at them, they take up a whole city block. These are massive buildings. We go to work in them every single day. But for somebody who is buying a car for the first time in 7, 8, 9 years, they walk into a huge facility, a huge showroom. Where do they go? The front desk is a mile away, right? So position some salespeople, some cubicles or desk or something right up front, a product concierge, somebody right up front who can greet them to say, hi, welcome to XYZ Motors. How can I direct you today? Are you going to service? You're going to body shop, right? So that's something I think dealers can do a better job of. And to some dealers' credit, as they rebuild their showrooms and modernize their showrooms, there's a lot of them that are incorporating that anyway.
Yeah. I completely agree. And I think that was a perfect way for us to end this podcast is in giving some of that feedback to the dealers, because I know some dealers, they don't have product specialists, they have sales teams. And so this idea of a product specialist is new. And so this was a jam-packed episode. A huge thank you to Carl Anthony for joining us today and reminding us that product specialists are not just sales professionals, but they are technology translators, they're customer advocates, and they're safety stewards. They are safety stewards. They are stewarding that culture of safety. And so to our listeners, whether you're buying a first car or your fifth car, understanding the technology inside that vehicle, it's not optional anymore. It is essential. So ask those questions, seek the clarity, and remember, empowerment starts with education. So if you found this episode valuable today, make sure you follow, share it with someone who needs to hear this if they are purchasing a car or thinking about purchasing a car for their teenager with the technology as well. And make sure you check out our parent episode about that, because we dived way deep into that whole teenage driving aspect of the technologies. And so leave us a review and keep sending in your questions so that we can make sure that the content that we are developing is valuable to you. And don't forget to tune into AutoVision News Radio with Carl Anthony as well to stay updated on his content. And until next time, drive safely.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Luke.
Of course. Thank you.